If you were to say, because this happens to me all the time, cryptocurrency is so crazy. There's so many different options. How do I know which one is going to be the one that survives? What would you say your crypto of choice is?
What objective are you trying to achieve?
Well, let's start with maybe a medium of exchange versus a store of value.
So if I had to pick one for medium of exchange, I'd probably go with XRP. It's not a good long-term store of value because Ripple holds somewhere around 50% of the remaining XRP. They're doing this on purpose because the goal of that is to have as little inflation of XRP as possible. So as the price goes up, they'll release a bit more into the market and it brings the price down. And you can't have a personal transaction currency. Like Bitcoin is really bad for this actually, because it's really expensive and it's really slow, particularly compared to XRP. And I think that's where the Swift banking network is going to move to, something akin to XRP, or at least it will run on an XRP-based blockchain. And I think if you're looking at physical asset, real world property ownership, whether it be glasses, shirts, jackets, houses, whatever, that's likely to be somewhere in the Ethereum space or Ethereum-like.
Okay.
And if you're looking for long-term store of value, that's the Bitcoin space.
Interesting.
And so the question is not which cryptocurrency I should use, but is what is my use case, and then using the most appropriate cryptocurrency for that use.
Right. And I think that's an interesting thing to point out, right? Because the way that the investment thesis has evolved for crypto, for good or for evil, has been which is going to be the most valuable. Like, is the token itself going to be the most valuable? Therefore, let's own a bunch of XRP versus Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin. But there's quite a big difference between utility and a store of value. Well, store of value, I guess you could call that a utility as well. That's its purpose. But one is very different from the other. So if we're thinking about an investment thesis, and I would go even further and say, if we're thinking about a savings technology, there is no other option apart from Bitcoin. That's right, because that's the only thing that you can be guaranteed, not guaranteed.
Nothing is guaranteed
in the world,
no.
But that's the only one out of all of them that you could say is most likely to succeed in life.
Because its purpose is long-term storage of value. So your objective here is to store my value of my labor and my property through time. And the best use case for that is Bitcoin presently. That's not to say it is the last version. There'll be new versions and things, and that's what you should look out for, is which ones are going to best fit the use case that I'm using. And so what I might end up doing, although I transact almost exclusively in Bitcoin now, is I might end up holding my monthly float in XRP for low transaction fees and fast transactions, and hold the majority of my wealth in Bitcoin and my assets on as an NFT somewhere in Ethereum.
This is interesting, right? So like there's a bunch of different views in the crypto space. Some people will be Bitcoin maximalists, and we're not going to use it unless it is on the Bitcoin chain or second layer chain, right? But you're of the view that it's what is the best tool for the function.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't use a hammer to cut a steak. You go and get a knife. What? That's the best use case for the tool that you've got. Okay. And people call me a Bitcoin maxi because I'm set almost exclusively in the Bitcoin space. I don't really hold much XRP or Ethereum, although I do have a little bit. I sit pretty much in the Bitcoin space just because I don't have a good use case for the other ones right now. But to take such a narrow view and just focus on one single currency, I think is very short-sighted. And I think that's partially what gets me to think more about the long term with Bitcoin, is because it retains its value in the long term, you have to consider the opportunity cost into the future. And I think that will help get rid of this very short-term thinking that we have with fiat currency. And this is something everybody complains about. Oh, election cycles are too short. Oh, the money just gets all spent. Of course it does. Why? Because in 3 years' time, it's going to be worth nothing. So you have to spend it today. And then you have to spend it on credit, because it's better to spend the money on credit now and then pay it back with less valuable dollars in the future. And so you get this perpetual cycle of short-term thinking all the time. Everyone's trying to spend everything they have right now. But if you look at the Bitcoin, it's like, well, since a month or two ago, since February, we went from what, $72,000 to $122,000. So when I'm buying a coffee or when I'm purchasing something for my car, I have to think about the opportunity cost of the future use of that Bitcoin. Because if I retain it, I will have effective more spending power in the future. But if I spend it now, I have to be sure that that's what I want to spend it on, and I'm going to get lots of value out of that thing.